On this episode of Dead Last, I'm trying something new. Way back in the very first episode, we did a ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise. But keep in mind, back then, first of all, I had less patrons. And second, none of them really knew what I was going to do. So I didn't get a ton of participation. That first episode was based on a mere 12 rankings, and that included mine and my 3 guests. And since then, my patron list has increased quite a bit, and time has gone on, and I'll admit, even my own opinions on the films have changed a bit. So it's time for a redo. I took the core 10 films of the series, I included the 2009 remake, and of course, Freddy vs. Jason, and I sent that list off to my patrons, and these guys answered the call, which was a much wider scope than the first time around. I also asked you guys, the YouTube audience, to send in your rankings, and at the ending of this episode, we're going to compare that list to ours and see how it differs. But for the patron rankings, I got a total of 44 entries, including mine, so that means that the best score that a movie can have would be 44 points, and the lowest score, worst possible score, would be a whopping 528 points. But before we get into that, I want to say that the purpose of this show is to highlight different opinions and to show that people have a variety of views on different films. It's important for me to say that there's no right or wrong when you're talking about the movies you like. If a movie you love is dead last, or one that you hate is in first place, it's not that everyone else is wrong or that you're wrong. It's just that you have a different opinion, and I can't stress enough that when it comes to talking about movies that you like, that's not a bad thing. But yeah, okay, enough lecture. Let's get on to the ranking, because I know you want to know what's in dead last this time around. And I guess I should say that the last time around, Jason Goes to Hell took this honor. So let's see if that holds up. Because coming in at dead last with a strong 440 points is Friday the 13th Part 8, Jason Takes the Booze Cruise. This one got named as dead last 18 times, which I'll tell you now is double the amount of the next highest dead last votes. So yeah, a bit of dislike here, but it was actually voted in first place one time as well. So I had this one in 10th place, and look, when it comes to this series, believe it or not, but there's not that many of them that I don't enjoy watching, and I really actually enjoy watching this one. Yes, I am fully aware that it kind of sucks. I know that it's Jason on a boat and they're promising you New York. I know that it's one of the absolute crappiest Jason face makeups in the entire series. I know that so much of it doesn't make sense in terms of character decisions and logic, but you know what? It's still kind of fun to watch in its silliness, and yeah, I get that you're expecting New York and only getting a cruise ship, but either way, it's the first time in the entire series that you're not just stuck with Jason walking around the woods and stuff. Out of the 7 movies before this, only one doesn't take place just in the surroundings of Crystal Lake, and that one might as well for how similar the setting is, so it's fun to see Jason on a damn boat. And let's face it, this movie's been out for over 30 years. We all know that he's on that boat. Everyone and their mothers know that the New York portion is only a tiny fraction of the movie. So being all butthurt about that plot point doesn't really make sense anymore. That being said, I guess I get why people rank it so low, because no matter how you slice it, it's just a pretty bad movie. But I still just find it a bunch of fun. The weird teleporting, one of the all-time classic kills with the boxing scene, the completely off-the-wall clothing choices, it's just silly. And it's a silly that I'm sure that some people hate, but it's a silly that I get a kick out of. But yeah, toxic waste sewers and normal kid Jason, there's certainly a fair share of dumb choices. But when I lay out these 12 movies to watch and scope them out and think about the ones that I dread watching, this ain't one of them.
Yo, man, it's cool. It's cool, man. It's cool.
All right, our number 11 had a fairly big drop down in points, and I'm telling you now, they kind of all are. When the points are this high, there's not a lot of close calls, and this space was previously taken by Jason Takes Manhattan, which dropped down 1, but with 407 points is the 2009 remake of Friday the 13th. It took the dead last spot 7 times, but the best score it got was 3rd place. And here's a minor spoiler: this is the only film on the entire list that didn't get either a 1st or 2nd place vote. And yep, this one is my dead last, and I know that it has fans out there. I know some people put this on their list of good remakes, but this is just a complete and total flatline with me. The best way that I can describe this movie is that it's like hearing one of your favorite songs from one of your favorite musical artists on American Idol. Like, they're singing it pretty well, but it's lacking the passion of the original piece, and the singer clearly doesn't really get what the song is actually about. They're just singing the notes, and those notes are fine, but the whole reason you fell in love with it in the first place is just missing, and it feels empty. And that's what this one is to me. Empty. It does everything that you expect a Friday the 13th movie to do, but where's the spark? Where's anything interesting? I don't care about any of the characters. I don't remember any of the characters. Jason has basically just turned into generic massive villain, and it's not like he was incredibly original in the first place, but he had his quirks that made him him. But then you suddenly have him taking hostages in a Texas Chainsaw lair, and you now have this guy who no longer really feels like Jason. And I get it if you like this one. There's nothing inherently terrible about it. In putting this in dead last, I'm not making a case for it being a bad movie. It's well made. It's fine. But in terms of a Friday the 13th movie, it's not what I want to see. And it's completely unmemorable. That'll take us to our 10th place film, and on the first go around, this is where the remake landed, so we know that something else is here. And with 395 points, we have our previous dead last winner, Jason Goes to Hell: The Final Friday. This was ranked dead last 9 times, the 2nd highest number, but again, half of what Part 8 got. But it did get 1 2nd place vote. I actually had this one in 9th place, and for all the scorn that it gets, I kinda love it. It's dumb, and it's terrible, and it has some genuine crap moments, but it's also 9 movies into a series, and it had kinda hit this point of, Jesus, what the hell can we even do here? So they, went with body switching worm thing, which clearly just doesn't feel like Jason or Friday the 13th, and that's generally the bulk of the criticism, and that's a completely valid point. This just doesn't feel like it's a part of the series that we've been watching, and it's so far removed from anything that we're comfortable with or expecting from a Jason movie. And again, I totally understand that. As a Jason movie, as a Friday the 13th film, this just doesn't work. But the fact of the matter is that it actually is a part of the series. It's part 9, whether we like it or not. So I usually just go into this one with that in mind and try to enjoy it as a fun, crazy little film, which it is. There's some really enjoyable stuff here. It's got one of the best kills in the entire series with the girl in the tent, and one of the strongest franchise characters with Creighton Duke. The Jason design is pretty cool, what with the melted mask and all, and it was actually great to see John LeMay here as opposed to the small screen as well. So yeah, I like it. You know that I also can't mention this film without calling your attention to one of my favorite little moments, which is Steven jumping over his own handcuffs in order to save his wife. But, of course, there's bad as well. The body switching stuff doesn't totally make sense with everything that had gone before, and the rules don't really add up. Jason has a half-sister now that has never been mentioned before, which is weird, and there's now some supernatural dagger that can kill him. And it's not like, oh hey, you're introducing this element late in the series. They're even introducing it late in the movie. They first bring this thing up like 10 minutes before the movie's over. But yeah, I enjoy it. It's dumb, but it's fun, and I'm glad that it escaped dead last this time around. At number 9, we drop about 50 points, going down to 345 points, and in the first episode, this spot was taken by Jason X, and this time around, It looks like that's the case again. Jason X. This was only ranked dead last one time, but it was also ranked first one time, and opinions were pretty split on this one. I'm not split on this one though, because I've got it in 11th place, and look, I know that this is one that quite a few people enjoy, but I'm just not one of them. Again, we're 10 movies into this series, so they need to do something different, and after part 9 didn't work, they know that they can't do too different again, so they did Jason in Space, and that's strike one for me, because by the time that they did this, they had already lost a space race to the Critters, Pinhead, and even a Leprechaun, so it's not like they were breaking new ground. By this point, a horror sequel in space was a bit of a punchline, so it was already like they didn't know where to take things. But then, keep in mind, Scream was all the rage, so the studio wanted this sort of self-referential humor kind of thing, which the filmmakers didn't really want to do, but had to kind of wedge in there. And needless to say, I don't think that comedy was really their strong suit, because I know for me, the jokes didn't really work. And I guess that's my whole problem with this, is that it's trying to be bad, which is something I never really like. It feels like their whole thing is, oh look, it's Jason in space, isn't that absurd? And yes, it is, but knowing that you know it's absurd and are goofing on it makes it less interesting. I actually would have preferred it if they took this like dead seriously and just went for it and made Jason in space, but tried to pull in the classic feel instead of throwing in wacky characters and groaner lines like the whole
"Guys, it's okay, he just wanted his machete back,"
which they thought was funny enough to put in the trailer and makes my entire body cringe up into my butt every time I hear it. I mean, Uber Jason looks cool enough, even if the string of events leading up to it are nonsensical. But one of everyone's favorite parts of the film is the hologram camp scene near the end, but it's just sad to me because it's like, oh hey, remember this? The stuff you liked about this series? We're going to remind you of that. But it just made me want to go back and watch one of the older ones instead.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
We're headed now to our number 8 selection, a spot that was previously held by part 5, but this time around, with 341 points, not a lot less than Jason X, is Freddy vs. Jason, which was number 5 last time, so this dropped quite a bit. This got ranked dead last 4 times and never got number 1, but it was voted in 2nd place once. I had this in 8th place, and yeah, last time I had this in 4th, so it dropped for me this time around. But here's where I talk about a certain something I noticed this time around, and that's that there's a certain contingency of the Friday series that I pretty much only really consider the last 20 minutes or so. It's like the first and second act become just a retread of things we've seen before, and the movies don't really distinguish themselves until that big finale, and this is one of those. And I'll bring this up a few more times as we get further in here. But the whole beginning of this movie feels like a same old nightmare entry. Not even a Jason movie, really. It has way more of a Freddy flavor to it. It doesn't get that Friday vibe until they get back to the camp. There's a couple of Jason-y moments here and there, like clearly the party massacre, but for a good portion of this one, you're stuck watching something on the level of like the later Nightmare movies, but then, there's that finale, and I'm not gonna lie, that finale is freaking fantastic, and I love it. Their showdown is everything that I wanted to see when you first said the words, Freddy versus Jason. It does not disappoint in that aspect. But you know what aspect it does disappoint in? Well, kind of everything else. The characters are kind of flat, the story is just a retread of things that we've seen before, and it just takes too long to get to where we want it to be. One of the biggest complaints about it seemed to be giving Jason a previously unmentioned fear of water, although I'll point out that this is only something that seems to be in his subconscious, in his dream world, and could just represent a deep-seated fear instead of something that affects him in the waking realm.
Wait a minute. Freddy died by fire, Jason by water. How can we use that?
In 7th place with 303 points, in a position that was once held by Part 7, which I guess makes sense, Part 7 in 7th place, but this time around, the space goes to Friday the 13th, A New Beginning, which jumps up one spot. People were very split on this one, like very split, and it was ranked dead last twice, but also ranked first once. I like this one a bit more than the consensus because I gave it 5th place, and I really like this one. I think that one of the things that people don't like about it is that it's not really a Jason movie, but come on. Let's face it, for like 99% of the movie, he's Jason. He looks like him. He acts like him. He kills like him. If it weren't for literally one shot of the film showing another face under a mask, you have a Jason movie. And whether or not he's the real deal, Roy is a pretty brutal and effective Jason with some of the gnarliest kills in the whole series. I know that one of the other big critiques of this is that it's very clearly the work of a porn director and feels grimier and sleazier than you would expect, and those people are right. But I mean, what do you expect from a film about a madman slaughtering teens right after they have sex? The concept is sleazy. Why shouldn't the execution be? I'll also stick up for it with the fact that it's the only film in the entire run, out of 12 damn movies, that plays out as an actual mystery. So many Friday films give us an unseen stalker, like, oh, I wonder who the killer could possibly be. And yeah, guess what? It's Jason. Duh. Really, the only two that could be a mystery are Part 1 and this one, and the original film is an unsolvable mystery, because the killer is someone we've never seen before. But here, it's an actual thing. Is it Tommy? Someone else? Well, yeah, it's Roy, and you can kind of figure that out on rewatch and see that it's pretty obvious, but it works. Plus, you are 5 movies into a series, and the last 3 have basically been the same film over and over again, and this one at least switches things up a bit, giving us a different setting and different kinds of characters, so it feels like what you're expecting, but also a touch new.
Ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby.
Hey, baby. Hey, baby.
Ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby, ooh, baby.
Going into the upper half of the list at number 6 with 297 points is a space that was taken by Part 3 last time, and it's Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, also up 1 space. It had a similar scoring to Part 5 and was ranked dead last twice, but also in the top spot twice. I've got this one in 4th place, and I'll admit that I have a soft spot for it. I think, I'm not sure, but I believe that this was the first one of the Friday films that I saw, or at least it's the first one that I remember seeing. And remember earlier when I said that there's a certain number of these that I pretty much rank on the final act only? Well, this is one of them. There's no way to cover up that the first 2 acts of this film are the same stuff that we've seen like 6 times before. It's just a bunch of teens out on a lake being taken out by Jason one by one until he suddenly switches tactics and just attacks everyone. But this was the first movie to give him someone to go one-on-one with. He's had some good adversaries before, but most of them were opponents who used like strategy and intelligence against him, but giving him someone to fight with telekinesis makes for a really exciting final battle. I get that it's a bit of a drag getting to that final fight, but it has a fun feel to it, and easily one of the absolute best looks for Jason in the entire series. Definitely the best zombie Jason look, and also the only Jason that I can think of out of any of them that seems to have expressions and emotions. But beyond that, look at this. They included the axe wound and the machete to the side of the face and everything. The mask has the axe notch as well, and also the damage from the outboard motor. So for like the only time ever, there was a focus on continuity. Alright, 5th place now, and the spot that was once held by Freddy vs. Jason, but now, with 233 points, it's the first appearance of the hockey mask, Friday the 13th, Part 3, in 3D, also up 1 spot. It's the first film on the list to not get any dead last rankings, but did get an 11th place tag, and was ranked in 1st place 1 time. I had this in a similar spot because I put it in 6th place, and there's a lot to love here. As I said, it's the first appearance of the hockey mask, and it's the first time that we get to see the Jason that we're familiar with. It's hard to believe that when you say Friday the 13th, And you think, well, obviously Jason, and you picture him in that mask, in that green shirt, and big hulking body, and to think that you didn't even get that until 3/4 of the way through part 3, it's pretty wild. But like I've said, this is another one that I'm judging based on the finale, really, because when you're watching these films as a marathon, like I usually do for these rankings, just sort of one after the other, this one basically just repeats everything that the two before it did. And it still gives us an unseen stalker killing kids one by the lake, which is weird because we know it's Jason. At this point, we know it's no one but Jason, but they still keep him hidden and all secretive for around 80% of the movie, which seems unnecessary except for maintaining the formula. But this gives you some great moments and some great characters. The gang is a fun addition and is clearly a way to get more victims in there, and of course ones that you want to see killed off in horrible ways. And I think that everyone loves Shelley, even though he's a bit of a dick, but I have the disadvantage of not having a 3D TV or anything. And to be honest, I've never seen this one in 3D. And the things that they do are just so distracting and weird. And like the eyeball popping towards the camera may be great for that, but without it, it looks really wonky. And it also suffers from that weird flashback subplot in which I think we're supposed to think that Jason may be a rapist and then let his victim go, which doesn't really sound like Jason, and I'm not sure what their intentions there were for the character, so I'm glad that it can kind of be brushed off and was never mentioned again. Now let's go to our number 4 movie, and this one came in with 226 points, and it's the original, the classic, Friday the 13th, and it holds its position since it was 4th the last time around as well. It did manage to get one dead last ranking, but took the first place spot 5 times. And I gave this one 7th place, which I know sounds low, but keep in mind how much I enjoy pretty much all of these movies. This movie at number 7 is higher to me than some of the things that I put in like 3rd in other lists. And one thing that I can't deny is the impact that this movie had on the horror landscape. Slashers had already kind of broken big, but this one took them to a whole other level. Even more so than Halloween, it basically shaped the formula for every kind of mystery, unseen hands, killing in a remote location horror flick for the next decade or so. Now, on the downside, in comparison with the rest of the series, it's a bit on the slower side, with possibly too much of the movie just being about the counselors and what they're doing, and not enough with the stalkings and such. But its worst offense is the finale. The big reveal in the big mystery ends up being someone we've never met, a character that has not only not been introduced, but not even mentioned. It's a cop-out and just doesn't work, and it feels like a cheat. Not that Pamela isn't a great villain. She is, and Betsy Palmer rocks it as a psycho killer. But if they had just, like, introduced her at the beginning in the town or something, like anything to establish who she is, so that it's not so out of the blue, I feel like it could have worked. And what's interesting is that I really think that out of all the major franchises, this one is probably the only one in which the first film isn't roundly considered the best, which is pretty interesting in itself. But the fact of the matter is that it's a very important film, possibly more important than it is actually good. Not that it isn't good, but it simply creates the winning formula, and what would come next would perfect it.
He wasn't a very good swimmer.
Okay, here we go. Top 3 time, and there's nothing but gold left. And coming in at number 3, keeping the same place as it did the last go around, with 177 points, is Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6. This one also never got a dead last, and its lowest score was 11th place, and it took the top spot a whopping 10 times. And one of those number 1 scores was me, because this is my favorite Friday film. I just love it. I know that the biggest criticism of it is that it leans a little too hard into the humor aspect, and that it feels too clean and sanitized. Like the backlash from the sleaze of Part 5 was a little too much, so they went too far in the opposite direction to give us a really commercial version of the franchise. But for me, it still works. It has a nice balance of what I want from this series. But then, and here's maybe what I think is the biggest win for me, is that you're looking at the 6th entry of a series, and it doesn't deviate drastically from the formula, but it changes things up enough to make it feel fresh and new. Making Jason an undead killing machine is just what they needed to spruce up the direction and the character, and it succeeds by giving us a location that we're familiar with in Crystal Lake, but makes it seem new by putting little kids there for the first time. Plus, they give us Tommy Jarvis again, but number 1, make him a more likable character than he was in Part 5, and also cast Tom Matthews, who is great and brings a more heroic persona to him. There are some things about it that I'm not crazy about at all, like the paintball guys are definitely a swing and a miss, but for every crap attempt at humor, there's 2 more that land, like that Bond-style opening. And, you know, I've talked a few times about how most of these movies I have to judge based upon the final act, since the whole opening of the movie tends to just be the same thing over and over, but that's not true here. The acts leading up to the final showdowns don't seem like a repeat of what we've seen before. And that's a pretty big feat.
Wherever the red dot goes, you bang.
Coming in at number 2, getting down to the wire here, but at number 2, with a mere 162 points, staying in the same place as it was last time, we have Friday the 13th Part 2. Once again, never got a dead last ranking, but the worst score that it got was 9th place, making it the first film on the list to get no double-digit rankings. And it also got the first place spot 8 times. This was pretty close to my scoring because I had this in 3rd place, and this one hits a lot of the right notes for me, but again, absolutely falls into my whole I judged this based on the final act, because let's face it, the entire setup to this one is exactly the same as the first film. It's basically in the same location, they just gave it a different name, with a very similar group of kids, and the same scenario of an unseen stalker coming after them. It's almost a remake of the first movie again, until they shifted near the end by having Jason appear, a character that had previously been established, improving on what they had done previously. There's really no mystery here because you kind of know that it's going to be Jason, but I suppose that there was a chance that it could have been someone else. But you did have the mystery of what the deal with Jason was, and to be honest, it's still a mystery considering he was dead as a child and his mother thought he was dead, and we did see him as a kid popping out of the lake at Alice, but now he's a full-grown adult, so where was he all this time, and so on and so forth. But as an introduction to Jason, this is really solid. Baghead Jason may not be as iconic as Hockey Mask Jason, but he's still pretty intimidating, and I think people frequently forget how nimble and fast that early Voorhees was. And then there's Ginny, who's one of the most fully formed final girls in the series, and I'm kind of sad that they never brought her back, but then also pretty happy because they'd probably do her like they did Alice and just kill her off really quick. But then there's possibly my favorite series character, Ted. In a series in which partying and getting laid and basically having fun gets you killed, let's hear it for this guy, whose life was saved because he wanted to stay at the bar and get drunk and not go back to the camp and get killed like everyone else. Good on you, Ted.
Excuse me, are there any after-hours places around here?
Sure are.
And here we are, our number 1 movie, and I guess it's no surprise because it was number 1 the last time around, and people still love this film because with 108 points, it's Friday the 13th, the final chapter, which was the final film of the series. No more were made after this. Like Part 2, it also got no dead lasts or double-digit ranks, and the lowest score it got was a 9th place spot, but took the number 1 space 15 times, so it's pretty loved. I wasn't one of those number 1s though, even though I think it's really great, but I will start off with telling you why I couldn't put it as my number 1. And that's because I watched these all in a row, and this fell into my final act only category. Because when you watch these movies one after the other, Part 4 starts off by simply doing what the other ones did. Again. For a solid chunk of the film, it just repeats what had been done 3 times before. Now, granted, it did it better than the others, and it doesn't feel like an exact retread, but it does hit a lot of the same notes, so there's an element of deja vu to it all. So that's the negative, and it's not much, because this is a great slasher flick all around outside of that. Jason looks great, what with Savini coming back to refine his look. The addition of little Tommy Jarvis as an opponent is interesting and feels different, and it features, hands down, one of the best villain deaths in all of horror. I don't think there's a moment in any of these movies that makes me squirm as much as seeing him slide down that machete blade with his face at the end here, and that's a pretty big feat. Plus, it's got that classic Rob, he's killing me moment, and I know I've said this before, but it bears repeating. I know that some people find that moment to be a little silly, but there's something disturbing about it to me, that recognition of your own death. It's always haunted me a little, and I love that. So you've got one of the best versions of our villain, some of our best protagonists, the greatest dance scene in film history, and you put all that together and you have the film that deserves to be number 1. So there you have it, there's the patron rankings. But for this episode, we went a bit further. I asked you guys out there to send in your rankings to see if things matched up and if we increased the sample size. And that size did increase, since I had 111 total, including YouTube, the patrons, and me. That means in this roster, the best score would be 111, and the worst possible score would be 1,332. Holy crap, that's a lot of points. So let's see what's different. In dead last with 1,085 points, instead of Manhattan, it's actually Jason Goes to Hell, which is in line with our original ranking. Out of 111 people, 33 of them ranked it dead last, but it did get 2 second place rankings. For 11th place with 1,059 points, a pretty close call, is actually Part 8, doing a little better here than in the patron rankings, but it still got 33 dead lasts, the same as Part 9, and was actually ranked in first 3 times. In 10th with 919 points is the 2009 remake, so our bottom 3 remains the same, just in a different order, but this did a bit better here than it did with the patrons, but still got 19 dead lasts and also 3 number 1s. 9th place remains the same because with 890 points, it's Jason X, which had 9th in our first episode, the patron ranking, and the YouTube one, so it's clearly the 9th best of the series. It did get 7 dead lasts though, and also 4 number 1 spots. In 8th at 841 points, no difference here, it's Freddy vs. Jason, which was also ranked dead last 7 times, but never took number 1, although it had 4 number 2 spots. Quick note, with 111 people voting, only 2 movies got 0 number 1 votes, and they were Jason Goes to Hell and this one. In 7 with 787 points, again, no difference, it's A New Beginning, and just like the 2 before it, was ranked dead last 7 times, but was ranked first twice. Coming in at 6th, again, no change, raking in 710 points, it's The New Blood, taking 3 dead lasts, but also 3 first places. At number 5, still no change, with 627 points, it's Part 3, which also had 3 dead lasts, but was put in first 4 times. Our number 4 movie is also consistent, and at 583 points we have the original film, and it still only received 1 dead last, but increased its number 1 votes to 7. Here's where we differ a bit, because at number 3, instead of Jason Lives, it's Part 2 with 449 points. This was also ranked in dead last 1 time, but was actually given a top spot 18 times. Our number 2, moving up one place from the patron ranks with 390 points, is Part 6, swapping spots with Part 2, and never received a dead last vote. Instead, taking one 11th place spot and was ranked number 1 34 times. And at number 1, again, matching the main list and our first list with 319 points, it's The Final Chapter. Interestingly, it also got no dead last, but just like Part 6 got one 11th place nod, but only 33 number 1 spots, one less than Jason Lives, but performed better overall, making it the undisputed top Friday the 13th entry. So there you have it, 12 movies, 2 different rankings. Yes, 2 different times. So we now actually have 3 rankings of the Friday series. The original one, the patron one, and the big one with all of YouTube in it. If you disagree with those, I would say to tell me down below what your ranking would be, but you had your chance to send in your ranking. You, as a YouTube watcher, had your chance to send in your voice, and you didn't take it, although you might be watching this 2 years from now and didn't know that I was accepting them. So let me see that in the comments down below. What would you put these in your rankings? And what did you think of this? Hopefully you had a good time and do this, and if you did send in your rankings, you liked it and you had fun doing it. I know I always enjoy seeing people's opinions on why they rank things. I like it when people actually send me a rationale of why they put something where they did. I read every single one. I don't get to respond to every single one, but I read every one. And it's a lot of fun to do. A lot of work, but a lot of fun. If you liked this video, please consider hitting that like button. If you enjoy what you see on the channel, hit subscribe. If you want to check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. If you become a patron, you get to do this every single month. You get to send in a ranking. You can become a patron for like $1 a month. $1 a month. It's pretty chill. You can do this dead last ranking every month. It's a lot of fun. These guys are my patrons, and I thank them all the time. And I thank you guys for just watching and participating. And I'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye-bye.